Hi and welcome, and today we are going to be talking about type 2 diabetes and the psychosomatic patterns behind this medical condition. Now remember that there are two types of diabetes, and we have diabetes 1 and 2. Now in the previous video that I did, if you haven't watched it, do also watch the one that I made about type 1. Now, with type 2 diabetes, the pancreas actually still produces insulin. However, the body does not produce enough, or is not actually able to use it effectively. So that is why I have split this diabetic sections into. So if you haven't watched type 1, the video and the articles for it, do have a peek and see what I said about those medical conditions and the psychosomatic patterns behind it. Now, the fact that the body does not produce enough insulin or is not actually able to use it effectively tells me that a person that actually has type 2 diabetes perhaps felt stuck in a family or in a social environment, work dynamic, that in their life where he or she was not actually sure who were healthy people and who were unhealthy people for them. And this could also be a result of conflict in values in the battle between these person's parents or people that they do value when they were growing up. So conflicting circumstances, conflicting conversations, and just not quite knowing where to find their place of truth and understanding and what resonates with them. And perhaps both parents wanted to project their own values and beliefs onto this person, in which in this case, if you have it, it could have been you. It could be that you just didn't even know what the parents were trying to say. That diabetes has so much to do with communication and the way that the communication was taking place, and also about how your circumstances and external circumstances emotionally made you feel. Now, in my research, I've also actually seen patterns in students and clients who experience a great deal of shock in their life. And when I say shock, I mean a traumatic event that they actually didn't heal and process. Now, do remember that what perhaps could be something that would shock you in a great big way might actually not be traumatic and shocking to someone else, because we do have different genetic predispositions that causes us to act and react differently than the other person normally would in our life and environment. So coming back to what I was saying, and that place of feeling of shock and that traumatic event that they didn't heal, and also often that actually left the person feeling completely out of control. Now, also someone couldn't process perhaps the death of a loved one, which is very much the same as in type 1 diabetes as well, or feeling a sense of helplessness to comfort someone who was going through a great deal of loss in their life. Now, in most cases, you can also perhaps find yourself either being overly controlling, and this need to micromanage and control everything is often sabotaging your quality of life. Now, meaning also that you only feel joy when you are fully in control of everything and around you. And if you are not in control of your life that can create that joy for you, I have noticed that people actually shift their patterns and start doing things for other people and shift their energy and focus to someone else's sense of joy and happiness, and sacrificing their happiness for the sake of actually someone else's. Now, from what I've also learned when working with clients and students is that what many of them have actually reported was that stress was the main issue in their life when they actually were diagnosed with diabetes. They also reported that the stress was actually due to feeling out of control, fighting against someone or circumstances that actually caused them to experience a great deal of stress. Now, this also includes being overwhelmed with responsibility. It could have been having a lack of control over certain people and circumstances as well. And often there's also trauma related to death of a loved one that has never actually been processed. And this trauma of what I just said, perhaps about a loved one, it can actually be even a secondary trauma, seeing someone passing away in a movie or hearing of the passing of someone else in your life that's perhaps not even related to you, but because there could perhaps be that strong predisposition of loss, that strong loss of joy that can actually trigger that predisposed trauma and feeling, causing you to feel a great deal of oversensitivity to these circumstances. And if you are challenged by this ailment, then you may also have an unmet need for love and nurturing, and feel that if you accept the responsibilities on behalf of others, meaning taking on other people's burdens, then you will receive the love that you are so much longing for, meaning like having to earn that love, having to work for that love, having to sacrifice something of yourself in order for the return of that for that love. And that could be it can be time, it can be energy, it can be effort. Now, another aspect to this is also that you seem to feel unfulfilled with what you have accomplished in life. Realizing that you may have missed out on your life's purpose because you were distracted by fear of success, perhaps. You feel that you didn't always have enough of what you needed in life. It is as if you're always lacking and searching for something. There's that void that just doesn't have an ending to it, almost like a bottomless pit that you just can't fulfill. And this could often actually be an ancestor who lost a child, and they were never able to process the loss of that child and the part of them that almost emotionally died with that child. It's that emptiness, that emotional lack and unfulfillment that you just cannot put your finger on. And this could also be related to someone who lost a whole family, right? Especially in the Holocaust. It can be during times of war. It could have been during times of invasion. It could have been during a natural disaster even. And their identity was connected to the family, so much so that with no family, they had no identity. There was a complete loss of their sense of self. Now, you may also feel joy when you are in control of everything around you, as I said earlier. And if you're not in control, you may sabotage and sacrifice your joy in order to bring joy and happiness to others. And this stems from a deep place of mistrust of others' ability and intention to look after you and to provide for you. That need where you feel that you have to do it all by yourself, because if you do it, then you know it's going to be done right. And my feeling with that is also that it could be coming from a place of someone not giving you a lot of freedom to make mistakes, and ultimately projecting that same level of pressure onto yourself, and unconsciously also not having that tolerance for other people's mistakes in your life. You may feel that if I'm in charge, then everything will be fine. And your support structure may also have crumbled at a very early age. And you ended up finding yourself in a situation where it was up to you to create your own survival strategies. And you often communicate also with a slight defensive tone, as you were always on guard, ready to defend your emotional, vulnerable heart that has been through great and challenging times. Now, you may also have been part of a family that suppressed your freedom. And this is not always necessarily consciously. It can be unconscious. Suppressing that freedom to experience life freely. There could perhaps be a part of you that feels robbed of your innocence, and having been pushed into a role that actually deprived you of your joy. And you were made to feel guilty for having needs. And if your needs were met, it was often with punishment, abuse, criticism, or some kind of negative association. There was a positive feeling that you had and that you needed to have met. However, the way that it was met actually did not create that feeling of fulfillment. Now, the question to ask also is, did a parent go through a trauma that affected you during your childhood? Did a parent experience a period of trauma and it actually tipped your world upside down because you perhaps felt responsible for it and unable to save and help or make the circumstances better and bring balance back into the family dynamic? Now, this could also include a situation that, for example, challenged your happiness, again, such as the death of a loved one. It could have been emotional abuse in the childhood or external circumstances that made you feel abused, even though the abuse was not directly directed at you. And a good example of this is actually, was your need for love and comfort met by a parent's depressed state or sadness or anger? It's not necessarily that the parent or this person deliberately wanted to abuse you. It's just that they were in their own emotional turmoil, and that overpoured into their relationship with you perhaps. And this pattern can also result in a self-punishing cycle in your life where you sabotage your goals and your relationships. It's important to explore the difference between your identity and the parent who experienced the trauma. Because the self-sabotage often can actually come from not wanting to go through the same pain again, not wanting to recreate the same feelings of when I need love, then I'm either rejected. When I need love, there's too much burdens and responsibility. It's often in so many cases because of negative associations that we create self-sabotaging patterns. And often a traumatic and stressful incident also took place just before the diabetes started. However, there is another bigger trauma that took place in your life, or perhaps childhood, that also needs to be explored first. Now, a more recent issue only added to an earlier existing trauma and may have been the tipping point of the iceberg, and that kickstarted the actual onset of the diabetes. So there was a build-up to that. It's not just one singular incident that often causes it. It can. However, just from what I've learned from my clients and students, that there often seems to be an actual buildup of it. Now, you may have had an ancestry line that has suffered a great deal of depression. They suffered a great sense of loss, especially loss of control. That could have been the direct result of abuse. It could have been, war. It could have been so many reasons. However, the emotional cause and feeling is to look at is that loss of control, and a feeling and a sense of loss. And also on a side note, and what I've learned was that indigenous people are actually very prone to diabetes, as their bodies don't have the proper enzymes to digest all the sugar that they receive from the Westerners. And the experience and the learning curve to take from this condition is to learn how to have healthy boundaries, not tolerate people's aggression and even abusive behavior towards you. And it's okay to not always be in control. Ask yourself, what in my life will change that I do not want to change if I finally stop being in control of everything and learn to just go with the flow? And the answer to that question will be a very powerful realization for you. And I do invite you to explore that. And also my final message to you is that, life is meant to be lived. It's not meant to be controlled. Because when you do that, you control a natural process too much, and you actually sabotage and destroy the joyous essence of it that was created and designed by the law of nature for you to just simply enjoy. Thank you for joining me.